Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Made Possible by Pop Culture. I cannot believe I'm about to say this, but we're already halfway through season 1. The time has flown, the guests have been great, and I hope you have all enjoyed yourself. Now, if you are new here, or if you just don't remember week to week, this is the podcast where I ask my guests to pick something from pop culture past that influenced them while they were growing up. But then they also get to talk about something that is pop culture's present that's also either influential or just plain exciting to them. Once again, I'm your host and producer, Danielle Turchiano. And on this episode, I'm so excited because I got to sit down with Liz Shannon Miller. She's currently the senior entertainment editor at Consequence, but she's done a lot of things before that. She worked for outlets like IndieWire and Collider. She was even a writer on Attack of the Show. So join me. Welcome, Liz. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for inviting me, Danielle. This is I've been a big fan of the podcast idea since you first mentioned it, and I'm very excited to discuss our topic of conversation.
Also, I want to say I did not introduce your cat because I wasn't sure if she was going to still be on camera, but we should all say hello to Liz's cat, Tank Girl, because I'm just jealous that her animal obeys and is in frame when I wanted mine to be, and he doesn't care.
This is just no, I mean, I will say the concept that she is obeying me in any respect is a loose one. Like she knows that if she sits here, I will pet her because I sit here a fair amount while I'm either working or I'm doing interviews. I actually should start doing more video interviews from here because I've already collected a few really good clips of mostly because what happens is I'll be interviewing a famo and she'll already be sitting here because I'll be, because of the waiting time for a junket, as you're aware of. And I then the famo's first response will be, what's the cat's name? And I will tell them it's Tank Girl. And then that immediately causes a conversation about the name Tank Girl, or just like a comment about Tank Girl's size, because size queen.
And I should also say, I mean, this is why I think everyone should be watching the podcast on YouTube, because you can listen to it on traditional platforms, but then you miss out on cute things like this.
Yeah, you miss out on Tank Girl giving her shoulder an active grooming.
I think it's cute.
Yeah, so it's she's adorable.
What I'm doing basically with every guest that comes on is I'm just letting them set up what they wanted to talk about, because I don't feel like there's a good organic way for me to randomly pick something out of pop culture and start talking about it. I think it's better for the person who it meant more to set it up. So why don't you go ahead and kick us off with, what was that formative piece of pop culture in your childhood that when I said, please come on my podcast, you knew you had to talk about?
The thing about me is, if you ask a lot of people, oh, what was her favorite show when she was a teenager, the people who know me well will probably automatically say to you, oh, Liz is a big X-Files fan. That's her favorite show from is the X-Files. I mean, you know me this well, you know this. But the thing of it is, the X-Files was actually my second fandom love. And I did love the X-Files during that period of time, and even arguably still today. But no, the show for me was Gargoyles. And there's a small clutch of us hardcore Gargoyles fans who became, media professionals of some kind. I occasionally find one of these people in the wild. It's always really exciting. But Gargoyles was to say a show with, technically Gargoyles only lasted 3 seasons, and only 2 of those seasons are good. But the second season was like 60 episodes long. So there's a lot of Gargoyles out there. And to really explain what the show was is really hard because there's a lot going on. And I mean,
I don't think you have to explain what it was. I think everybody is probably already Googling it if they don't already know. Fan. Well, or that.
The Gargoyles heads are out here in force, going, you don't need to explain this to us. Actually, I should check right now. What's the rating we're going for here?
I mean, it's the internet, so you can curse if you want to curse. I mean, I will say that you're not supposed to curse in the first 10 minutes of YouTube, but okay. I can avoid. I'm not timing you.
Okay, well, I'll keep an eye on the clock because talking about gargoyles, I get excited sometimes.
No, that's good. That's what I wanted. I wanted,
So
this is the thing you're super passionate about. But you mentioned that it was a relatively short-lived series, especially for back, it was in the 90s, 1994 series. Did you start watching it from the beginning, or was your entry point, like you talked about that really long season two? Did you end up kind of coming in a little later?
I can't pinpoint. I can't say for certain I started watching it right from the beginning, but I certainly caught up fast if I hadn't. And I mean, it was airing on in syndication on weekday afternoons on I guess Fox. Gosh, the Disney, it was the Disney afternoon
Hmm.
block, which which 90s kids will remember well. It also was the same like kind of setup of programming that included Darkwing Duck and no, Animaniacs and Pinky and the Brain would have been somewhere, would have been like through a different, like the Kids WB. Those were, yeah. I should have probably done more research before I.
No, I mean, listen, everyone's memory, I will be honest, I used to watch all of that and I couldn't tell you where it aired, what came first, what came after. My memory just blurs it all together, to the fact where there was a period of my life where I thought Darkwing Duck and Scrooge McDuck were the same show, because I just couldn't remember enough details. And that sounds crazy because they're obviously very different shows.
Scrooge McDuck, I
That's why
mean,
I like doing this, because I like us, like, let's revisit this. What are our memories of it? Does
yes.
it hold up, etc. But talking about when you realized that you were a fan of it, because whether you started from the beginning or came in a little bit later, there had to be something that was like, this is what keeps me coming back.
I mean, that's what we're talking about essentially. Because when I said to you, "Oh, I'd love to talk about the show Gargoyles," you said, "No, you have to be more specific."
Well,
And
because
I
what
was
if
like,
another Gargoyles head wants to come on? I can't have two episodes about the same exact thing.
That is true. But anyways, so I decided but it wasn't hard to figure out what to talk about in this context because uh I am a longtime appreciator of will they or won't they romances across all realms of fiction. And for me, you don't get much better than the Goliath and Elisa romance in Gargoyles for that. And it's such an interesting relationship, especially again for a kids animated series. It's played out in a really sophisticated fashion over the course of the first, I guess, probably like 75 episodes or
Hmm.
so, because again we don't talk about season 3. But it's not like,
I'll be honest, I haven't seen season three, so that's good because I'll have nothing to
I mean,
contribute.
I mean, when we were discussing all this, like I gave you a list of episodes to watch. How many of them did you actually watch?
I watched The Awakening, the first five, and then I watched the Mirror episode because the way that you described it, I don't know, there was something about like a magic mirror is stolen that just like sparked something from me that reminded me of something I'd watched as a kid. Like I couldn't remember what, but I was almost to the point where I was like, did I see this episode? Like, what am I thinking of? And then at the end of the day, I think I was probably thinking of Snow White, but
Sure.
I I needed to know.
Sure.
So anyway.
You've seen the at least setup of the entire series, which is, important for talking about it because I mean, the theme song, which I used to be the opening credits, which I used actually, okay, can I do it still?
Yes,
Right.
please, because
Right.
on episode two, Megan Vick came and recited the entire Dawson's Creek virginity monologue for Joey Potter. And so now
Okay.
my thing is
All
like,
right. All
whoever
right.
wants to come and do things from memory, that's my social clip. That's amazing.
Okay, let's see if I can do it. And you have to imagine that my voice sounds like Keith David's
Hmm.
voice, which I know isn't a hard leap because we sound like identical, but yeah, okay, let's see. Okay. 10,000 years ago, superstition and the sword ruled. It was a time of darkness. It was a world of fear. It was the age of gargoyles. Stone by day, warriors by night. We were warriors. Shit.
That's
Gosh.
pretty good. I
Oh
mean, I don't have it up in
no, this
front of
is
me, but
bad.
that
Terrible for
sounds
me. This is
spot
terrible.
on.
No, sword by day, a stone by day, warriors by night. We were betrayed by the people we were sworn to protect, frozen in stone by a magic spell for 1,000 years. Now the spell is broken. Now we are in Manhattan. The spell is broken, and we live again. And then ba 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 ba.
I love it. I love that you remember
Oh wait,
it.
hold on.
I also
All right,
love
hold on.
that they
We are
summarize.
defenders of the night. We are gargoyles.
Oh,
And
of
see.
course.
Yeah, sorry.
I will say I love that how much summary went into that
Yeah.
opening. Like they really set up exactly what you were about to see and all of the backstory that so maybe you don't need the exposition episode to episode because you get it all right there. Like they're there for 1,000 years, which here's my thing. And I want to dive into why that relationship between Goliath and Lisa was so important to you because here's my thing. I
Sure.
went into this as an adult watching it for the first time. I don't, like I said, I don't remember watching this as a kid. I don't, maybe I caught an episode here or there. I'm not sure. Um, and immediately what struck me by the will they or won't they is, well, she's human and he is not. And automatically adult Danielle was like, I have so many questions. I have so many concerns. And then you add in his ex is in the show, or she's not really
Oh,
his ex, but like their
no, she's
relationship is
definitely
rocky because like there's still feelings there and jealousy and whatever. But and I was just like, I need to understand what I wish I had seen it as a kid because I do feel like maybe I would have caught on to some of the same things that you loved, but I want to know what it was about that relationship that made you say this is the piece of the show that's keeping me coming back.
well, I think the problem with okay, I it's so interesting that you bring up Demona because for me, Demona's
Too
not
soon?
really a factor. She is so his ex. Like it's like in the early episodes, like there's a little bit of,
Right.
well, I just arrived in this strange time and place, and you're a familiar element, and maybe there's still a little something there. But no, I mean, like the eighth or so time your ex tries to kill you, I feel like you get the sense that the relationship is over. And I think I think Damona's tried to kill Goliath at least 8 times by the end of the first season.
Well, the thing is, you would hope that they would get the hint and like move on, but in some shows they don't.
No, but
Some shows are very toxic.
and the thing is, like, Goliath has a surprising amount of emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
and like actually, and the thing that's there's so many elements to this that make it really fun to talk about. I mean, I like the thing I was going to mention earlier is that like one of the elements I really love about a good will they or won't they in television is
Mm-hmm.
that you don't like it's the little moments from episode to episode that really sustain it. Like, to go back to the X-Files,
Mm.
like, as a long time, I was a Mulder and Scully fan. Like I wanted to see them get together. It was a very polarizing topic at the time, and it's still a little polarizing now, actually. It's kind of
Yeah.
funny. But anyway, so as a teenage Mulder and Scully fan, I was watching every episode for that 2-minute moment,
Mm.
Amy, maybe 2 minutes, maybe 30 seconds, just like a one-off line that was like, oh my God, they're going to have sex someday. And and that
Someday off camera, I may never see it. Sorry, too soon. Too soon.
there's no such thing as it's not not recent enough. Anyways, I don't know what the opposite of too soon is. But yeah, but in terms of gargoyles, like a lot of those moments, like there's a lot of like Elisa's in peril and Goliath's like much more mad than he would be normally if some other random human was in
Mm-hmm.
peril. Like that sort of stuff was really propelling it. Um, I mean, if you're talking about just kind of in general appeal in terms of tropes and so forth, like there's a very clear uh line you can draw from Beauty and the Beast to
Oh
this.
yeah.
And in fact, the show did it at one point explicitly because there's an episode where all the gargoyles are really excited because they get to go celebrate Halloween on the streets of New York, and they get to run around and no one thinks they look weird. They just think they have great costumes on. And during that episode, Elisa also gets into costume, and she literally
Mm.
wears the bell dress from the ballroom scene in Beauty and the Beast. And she and Goliath have a little dance. And so, like, I mean, the show is courting this from the beginning. And also, I think the other big thing with Will There, Won't Theys is that you need to have if you're going to keep up the won't they part, there needs to be some pretty clear reasons why that's the case.
Yeah.
And, for Mulder and Scully, if what I there are other examples of this, but like,
No, it's
no,
fine to go back to them.
I
I think that that's a good comparison.
well, the problem with Mulder and Scully though is that the won't they in their case was at a certain point pretty nebulous. Like there's kind of at the beginning the kind of meta text, and this is what fans are putting onto it, which is, oh, they can't get together because partners at the FBI can't hook up.
Hmm.
Actually, I believe that is not true. I believe that within the like FBI handbook, like it's like, yeah, I mean, we got you need to clear it with HR and everything, but there's nothing nothing in the rules that says a dog can't play basketball or two FBI agents can't hook up. Even if they're partners. I could be wrong about that. I am no longer an expert on FBI human resources.
But you also have to figure things have changed through the years anyway.
And
I
also,
mean,
it's also, by the way, there was never on the X-Files an explicit conversation about,
oh
oh God,
no.
if it's you're really hot, Mulder, it's too bad we can't have sex because of the FBI regulations.
No, look at all the liberties that they took anyway. If they
Yeah,
wanted them to have sex on the show, they would have taken a liberty, even if it was a rule that they shouldn't. But like what you're talking about, I think is very interesting from a fandom aspect of when the show isn't giving you these reasons, these answers, and the thing you want still isn't happening. You're finding ways to justify it
yeah.
in a way that would still have you come back to the show because you love the show, you love the couple, whatever it is. And I find that so fascinating. I'm guilty of doing that for so many shows.
Well, and I think the reason why the X-Files is a bad example in talking about this right now
Mm.
is that because the won't they within within the text of the series was so nebulous
Mm.
that and for the record, this is one of the things that drove me crazy, which is just like you don't like some of my favorite scenes of the X-Files are just when two characters are having an actual conversation about their feelings. Like it doesn't need to be a big swooping declaration of love. Just like talk to each other like you're normal people who are sharing information about each other's way of state of being because you are friends.
Mm.
Like even just just like stuff like that, basic stuff like that. It was always kind of it's why we learned to be obsessed with Vince Gilligan episodes,
Yeah.
over 10 years before anyone else outside the weirdo niche X-Files fan community. Like the weirdo niche X-Files fan community would see Vince Gilligan's name on an episode and be like, oh good, the characters are going to talk to each other like they're people.
Yeah.
Like we were ahead of you guys on ahead of
What
most
you
television.
guys, I watched that show. I mean, I don't think I would
No,
call myself as
were you
devout
like
a
part of this
fan.
weird specific niche that was looking for the episode writer? Because that's the point of pride. I
Right,
don't,
right.
and I don't mean to say anyone's less or more of a fan. I'm just saying
I know.
us weirdo niche fans, we're looking for Vince Gilligan's name.
Yeah.
Anyways, this is all a long way of saying that the X-Files did it very badly because their will they or won't they was basically like there was no the push and pull was off because there was
Mm.
no pull, there was no there's just kind of a vague sense that like, oh well, the conspiracies, the aliens, it would be a bad idea. They didn't even bother with like the whole they even had the potential to play into the what I've called for years, quote unquote, Spider-Man reasons, like, oh no, Mulder can never get together with Scully because if he gets together with Scully, the conspiracy will use her against him.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but they didn't even they played with that, but they didn't even explicitly get into it. I really want to be talking. I'm going to shift away from Gargoyles because shift away from the X-Files because I want to talk about. I want to bring up a different and better example of a will they or won't.
Well, because I was going to say, like, I think that's interesting setup though, for then how surprisingly to me, an animated show aimed at children did something like that better.
Oh
That
yeah,
to me is a really interesting, I think, discussion point of, granted, X-Files wasn't built to be rom
no,
drum, but I just think that it's very interesting that the things you didn't get from the X-Files you got in this animated show, which arguably when you animate a show for kids, you have to be more careful about the relationships because you're teaching them what relationships are or maybe should be, and you shouldn't be too graphic, you shouldn't rush into things that will they or won't they maybe would be dragged out more than it would be on some other shows.
well, I will say to Gargoyles, one of the major things you would say I can say to Gargoyles' credit was that it was technically a children's show.
Hmm?
It aimed for a slightly older audience, and I think explicitly, like I think it might have been like a oh God, like a Y7 or
Well,
versus just Y general. Like, but the
no, I
point,
know, but to me, that's still very different from, X-Files is aiming for adults. So like the way that you do a relationship, I
but
would
these,
hope is a little bit with a little bit more care because impressionable minds, clearly formative experiences are being made.
well, I mean, here's my point though. Gargoyles was written with more emotional intelligence when it comes to human relationships than the X-Files
Mm-hmm.
was. The X-Files, like when it came to episode continuity over how characters felt about each other, like there was
Mm.
a lot of just like inconsistencies and a lot of malarkey. And to get back to my point about just kind of like about will they or won't they's, I think like the won't they part is so important because the won't they can't be BS. And it also can't be insurmountable. And it also can't be something, it can't be insurmountable in forever. Like I'm going to say that the US office is a good example of this because with Jim and Pam, there's a very clear won't they reason, which is that in the first two seasons,
Mm-hmm.
Pam is in a relationship with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone knows it's a crappy relationship and that she should leave Roy and she should be with Jim, but she is not. And at the end of season two, the status quo changes on a number of levels. First thing is that Pam also just kind of been oblivious to the depth of Jim's feelings. And also at as of the beginning of season three, Pam breaks up with Roy. But Jim has already taken this other job, and so they're separated. So that's their won't they for a good chunk of season three, which is that they're just physically in different locations. And then when Jim comes back to Scranton, he is in a relationship, so there's that push and pull. And then it's and also even with that relationship being a factor, the show does a really nice job of exploring how Pam is trying to explore, trying to figure out herself out of a relationship. She's trying to
Mm-hmm.
reach a new level of just kind of trying to reach a new level of self, if you will. And so like there's some really strong character work building up to the end of season three, where you get Jim asking Pam on a date. And then at the beginning of season four, it takes a moment, it takes a beat, but they do officially reveal themselves to be a couple. And I mean, The Office lasted 9 seasons, and the last five, like their big will there, won't they, was essentially resolved.
Right.
And I think that like the lifespan of that show, just like talking about the overarching arc, you can see why that won't they is so good. So
Mm-hmm.
to bring it back to Gargoyles,
Mm-hmm.
the won't they in Gargoyles is so nice and clear. It's that, you know, he's a fucking gargoyle.
Thank you. I was like, I feel like this is the biggest won't they ever. On one respect, it's kind of nice to see, like, if you want to use this as an allegory for something that you can get past what someone looks like, you can use this as different races and say, you can make the argument of they're trying to show you that you don't need to look like the person that you're in the relationship with or whatever. But like on the core base level of what they are not the same species.
Yeah, that's a problem. That's not, I mean, and it's not even necessarily a species thing. It's like, there's a real we are from two different worlds
Mm.
vibe. And at the same time, though, and this is why it's so good, is that element, the fact they are so different on a very basic level, really highlights all the ways in which they are the same and which their
Mm.
personalities mesh really well. Like they both have a really strong sense of justice. Elisa is a police detective. Um, you know, it was a different time. They both have a really strong passion for justice. They both just get along really well. They both care about family a lot. Like there's a lot of like there's a lot of ways in which they truly are like actually compatible personalities. And the show and not only that, but the show gives them a lot of time to get to know each other and really explore that relationship. Um, and like one of the reasons why season two is like 57 episodes. The number keeps changing every
I
time
mean, we can always Google it to get the real number,
no,
but I
I
know
mean
what you mean.
at
It's
this
a
point,
very long season.
it's a very long season. I don't remember the exact business particulars of why season two
Mhm.
was 60 something.
Also, that's
Seven
not
to
something you would know when you're a child watching this in 1990, whatever, because you're, even if you wanted to get that information, it would have been a lot harder for you to research that. Mm.
Uh, Daniel, I'm also part of the generation that learned how to use the internet at a very young age, very specifically to look stuff like this up. I was like there's a whole book written about how, teen
Oh,
girls in the 90s learning how to use the internet like led to the creation of social media as we understand it today.
right. I just meant like there was no IMDb that would be easy for you to access. So, I mean,
But
God
there
only
are
knows how you had to find this stuff when
I
you,
knew how to use I was on some of the message boards. There were websites in general that would share information about gargoyles like this. Like I wouldn't say like, it was like super plugged in, but
Hmm.
this was late enough in the 90s that the internet was still a vaguely useful resource.
Okay.
Um,
Okay, fair.
but that said, being said, I mean, 13, 14-year-old Liz is not actively aware of, how syndication works. So
Sure.
yeah, your point is definitely taken that there was probably business elements to this I didn't understand. But anyways, my point in bringing up season 2 and its length is that the central storyline of season 2 is that uh magical island blah 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 stuff happens,
Yeah.
and Goliath, Elisa, and Elisa's not sorry, geez, no. uh Goliath, Elisa, and Goliath's daughter, Angela, who, spoiler alert, is Damona's daughter as well. Like they did have a kid back in the olden times, or they had an egg together, and then the egg hatched on Avalon. These, it's an interesting show. There's some stuff that happens in this show. Um, but anyway, so season 2, like the crux of it is Goliath, Elisa, and Angela go on essentially what gets called the world tour,
Hmm.
and it becomes a series of quasi standalone episodes that are all just like, let's go visit Irish mythology and learn about the sirens, and Cole Meany from Star Trek Deep Space Nine is there. Or let's go to Africa and we'll meet Elisa's mom, voiced by Nichelle Nichols from Star Trek. And then we'll also meet the spider Anansi, played by LeVar Burton, because why not? I'm trying to
I feel like you
well,
should have put this in your email to me. I definitely would have watched the LeVar Burton episode.
I can tell you which one that is.
After the
It's the same
podcast, I
episode
will watch.
yeah, it's the same episode it's the same episode with Elisa's mom, as played
Mm.
by Nichelle
Mm.
Nichols. On Easter Island, we meet the Easter Island aliens who inspired the carvings of the giant heads. That one is voiced by Avery Brooks from Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Awesome.
Um, and then we even talked about the fact that Damona is voiced by Marina Sirtis from Star Trek: The Next Generation, and Jonathan Frakes is, I believe, maybe also a producer on the show. Either way, he definitely plays the main villain, and he's also how they got a lot of these other actors.
Right.
Let me see, who else can I name? Kate Mulgrew.
Mm.
I mentioned Cole Meany.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Michael Dorn. Shoot. Oh, and then of course Brent Spiner, who was in the episode you saw. And I feel like this is a good segue. I just want to actually wait before I'm going to finish up my rant about the world tour.
Okay.
But my point of which is that yeah, Goliath's daughter is along for the ride, but there's a ton more development between Elisa and Goliath, just like
Mm.
being cute and maybe flirting, and maybe like maybe flirting, maybe being awkward, not really knowing how to be together because they come from such different worlds, as we've talked about. Yeah. So it's a
But
very
even that, I mean, I would say even that to me is already heads and tails above other types of character development, relationship development, because now they're trying to figure out how to be together. And his daughter
yeah.
from a previous relationship is in the mix. This is all very mature stuff, I think, for kids watching at home to kind of absorb and maybe not understand everything, all the nuance right away, but it seeps in. And also with all of these standalone episodes, you're learning about cultures.
Oh
It's
yeah.
not all gargoyles and supernatural and things that I think are fake. You're learning about cultures.
Yeah, no, there's some really interesting stuff. There's some very progressive storylines. Season 1 has an episode where that takes on gun control really
Oh,
serious.
wow.
And it's actually really cool. I'll just describe it briefly. So in this episode, Elisa accidentally gets shot by her own gun. Like one of the other gargoyles is playing, when the younger gargoyles is playing with it, when he fucking shoots her,
Hmm.
and she's in the hospital. And Goliath, by the way, is upset
You
and
think?
and maybe is trying to figure out who the person who shot Elisa is, so he can do bad things to him. And then of course, but anyway, so at the end of the episode, like Elisa's like, you know what, the truth is out, and the gargoyle who shot her feels very badly about it, and she
Mm.
forgives him, and she's like, look, I left my gun out for you to
Mm.
play. I am responsible for it. And then in a later episode, it's not really like highlighted or mentioned in the line of dialogue. You just see her come home from work and take her gun off and put it in a lockbox.
Wow.
And it's just like, and then like this is like the sort of continuity you don't get from the animation of this era.
Well, not even just continuity, but like those are the conversations we're still having today when we're talking about if you're going to show a gun on TV, at least try to impart messages of how to do this safely. And like there
Yeah.
are whole coalitions dedicated to working with TV shows that feature this content to show them why they should do it. And I can't say for sure that there was anybody helping Gargoyles or if this was just organic to them. But the fact that they were doing this in 1994, 1995, whatever, and the fact that we still have to do it today, I think is huge.
Yeah. No, it's such an impressive show on all these levels. Um, I am vaguely very very curious now. What did you think of The Mirror? Because that is my
The
favorite.
episode itself.
Yeah,
Well,
that's my
so
favorite. That's
here's
my
the thing.
favorite show to people at random.
That's why I watched it because I was like, you said this is the episode that you rewatched the most,
Oh
and I
yes.
want to see if I can deduce why. And I'm not sure that I was able to deduce why because I'm sure you have a very like personal reason for why it's the one that you rewatched the most. I kind of would have thought it would have been the end of season 2, which you call what you consider the series finale, when they finally get together and they finally kiss, because like to me that's the payoff, right? Like that's you as a fan of the show, but specifically as a fan of Goliath and Elisa, you're waiting for those moments, and that's the biggest one, arguably.
Well, if you recall, the exact email I sent to you also specified that you had to watch the entire 3-parter that ends season 2. Because
Yeah.
the problem with the problem with this end of season 2 is it's actually a really solid 3-parter. It's a good action. There's a lot of good narrative thrust to it.
Mhm.
There, and yeah, the resolution of the will they or won't they at the end is literally like, top 10 TV watching moments for me ever. I screamed, I was cheering, I ran around the house, I just couldn't handle it. But no, the reason I love The Mirror is it is the Goliath and the Lisa romance, because
Mm.
I'll describe this for people who aren't familiar. Because there might be 2 or 3 people listening to this out there.
I feel like the people who are fans will find this podcast, this
Oh,
episode, maybe not the whole podcast.
there are dozens of us, I'm telling you. So in The Mirror, Damona manages to ensnare Puck from Shakespeare. We haven't even touched about on the fact that that is not the first or the last, or like the Shakespeare references are in the dozens.
Mm.
Like
I will be
Macbeth.
honest, I probably missed most of them because I just don't like
Oh no,
Shakespeare.
I'm just talking about the series as a whole. You remember the character Puck, though,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yes. Puck is just one of the many characters
Mhm.
from Shakespeare who play a major role in Gargoyles. Anyways, Puck gets ensnared by Demona, and Demona gives him the instruction of turn all the gargoyles into humans. And I forget, you watched it more recently than I have.
Yeah, yeah, but
She says make all basically it's a situation where, okay, no, I remember now.
so
I know, I remember now. I
you
remember now.
skipped ahead a little bit. Yeah, I was gonna say she wishes that Elisa didn't exist.
She wishes that Elisa Massa was no more. And Puck is like, well, I'll make her not a human anymore, and I'll turn her into a gargoyle. He uses Puck legalese
Mhm.
for working that out. And then Demona says, no, turn the gargoyles into humans. And so the gargoyles all get turned into human. Oh God, I'm messing this up so badly. Point is
So,
that by a certain point in the episode, everyone who's human in New York has been turned into a gargoyle, and they're very confused about it. But also, they also seem to be very weirdly accepting of it. Like they don't freak out. They're just like, oh, okay. I guess I'm a gargoyle, even though I don't know how to fly. And then all of the gargoyles are human.
mhm.
So you get one of my favorite things in animation is when you get to see like new versions of the characters
Okay.
that you've been watching for a while. So you get to see the human version. You get to see like the human renderings of what all the original gargoyles would look like. Meanwhile, you also get to see what Elisa would look like as a gargoyle. And then you get a lot of fun tension between her and Goliath
Mm,
when they are both when they are both gargoyles at the same time, because there's a brief overlap there.
yeah.
And then when you get to when they're both humans at the same time, they have this very brief moment, and then Goliath gets sucked back and becomes a gargoyle again. And the reason I love showing this episode to people, aside from the part where I think it's just a really fun episode.
It is fun. I just, when you said that was the one you rewatched the most, I was like, I can't pinpoint the moment or the reason
No,
exactly.
the moment, and I think it's because I think I really like rewatching it because I find it really funny that my reaction is still this reaction. I just at the very end of the episode, Goliath is turned back into a gargoyle. Elisa's now human again, as mentioned. And he's back up. He's back up on the tower. He's ready to turn into stone. And he's like, Elisa, I want to say, and she's like, she cuts him off and she says, yeah, I know what you're gonna say. You're so glad things are back to normal and you're a gargoyle and I'm human and all of that. And he's like, that's not what I was. And he gets interrupted because he turns into stone because he's a gargoyle.
Hmm.
She just like shrugs up her shoulders and she's like, yeah, I know that's not what you're going to say, but that's the way it's got to be, or that's
Hmm.
the way it is. And every time I hear that line, I just like lose my mind in this like painful adolescent. Oh God, it's so torturous. And they just want to be together, but they can't because she's a human. He's a gargoyle. And could they ever overcome this one obstacle? The answer is yes, yes, they can in the episode Hunter's Moon Part 3. And then we
Right.
watch it.
But one of the things that I find really interesting about when, especially on this podcast, when people are coming on and they're talking about fictional character relationships that influence them, you have this layer of this is television. So everything that you were talking about earlier, they have to, they have the will, they won't, they have to make that last a long enough time because once they get together, the show might not change in full, but certainly a lot of important dynamics change. And I wonder what that does for your perception as a child, then going into the world, having your own relationships. Are these relate like this is not therapy. I don't want you to like feel pressured by my question, but just in the sense of you are watching these characters who arguably maybe can't get together because they're not of the same, again, species, whatever word we want to use, and yet they're still having a meaningful relationship. So is that teaching you that romantic relationships are not the end all be all, or is it giving you just that kind of hope that like if we just have to wait and see, maybe they can overcome it and then maybe I can get the relationship I want later? Like what were you able to kind of
No,
assess that?
no, I'm legitimately giving this some thought. And I don't know if I can draw a direct connection between my own personal life and my own relationships and the kind of romance fiction that I've enjoyed. And I'm just saying romance fiction, just kind of a general big catch-all
Mhm.
bucket across all media. Um, because I think that I've really kind of come to embrace my consumption of romance fiction of
Mhm.
all types as a real appreciation and enjoyment of tropes and just seeing well executed tropes in certain situations. Um, and uh yeah, I think like in my own personal life, like I feel like for one thing, I'm more attracted to
Mm.
people similar to me in terms of personality, in terms of
Sure.
um I think as watching it as a kid though, as a teenager, um, I I think that I was often attracted to those kind of setups. And I think a lot of will they or won't they's are also kind of, you know, workplace related or circumstance related. And
Yeah.
I think for me, I think for me, I found the concept of just like going out and dating and meeting people really weird. And for me, it made a lot more sense to just kind of fall in love with someone, that you might meet through
Mm.
happenstance, and then just ended up becoming a big part of your life.
Yeah.
So like, I think for me, that's I think probably the closest connection. Like even to this day, like, I'm like any single adult, I'm on the apps and I'm, trying to figure out how to navigate them to like actually make a human connection with somebody.
Hmm.
I very much hate it and I think in part because I have in my adolescent brain, like I should just stumble across somebody and in my
Yeah.
life. I shouldn't be like finding people on an app. Like there's still some magic in the chaos of that. Like,
Right.
who knows? Like, I won't say like I go exploring, castles that have just been transported to the top of New York skyscrapers on the off chance that I'll get knocked off it, and then some gargoyle from the year 1000 has to come swoop down and save me. But I'm like,
No, but
but
I
when I
know what
say
you
it out
mean.
loud like that to myself, I'm like, there are worse ways to meet a guy.
Well, I also know what you mean, just in the sense of, these things that we imprint, that these things that imprinted on us when we were so young, they did teach you that there's a little bit of magic, and that there's a little bit of luck or circumstance or whatever word you want to use. A lot of these stories, especially from what I remember from my childhood, was like you're not looking for it and then it finds you. But now all the apps are about, well, you have to be looking for it, whether it's a relationship or a one night stand or whatever, you have to actively be looking for it. It's a lot harder, it feels like, to just meet someone, because if you could do the old fashioned thing and just like go to a bar, go to a restaurant or wherever and try to meet someone, but like I think we've also kind of internalized is that creepy, is that safe, is the person I'm going to meet there somebody I want to meet if I can't vet them first, it's it's hard out there today. I
It's
don't know
hard.
how we do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly tough, and I think like there's when I think about it, like I think about the concept of the active protagonist in
Mm,
romance fiction. Active protagonists in romance fiction, like their end goal isn't falling in love necessarily, or if it
mm,
is, like, it's always, they're trying to make it work with the wrong person. Meanwhile, and like, but
yep.
you think about
Something
most.
surprises them.
Yeah, and yeah, you're thinking about most romantic comedies, and most of the time it's I mean, first example that comes to mind is Pretty Woman. Like,
Mm,
no one's objective in that movie is to fall in love. Like, Vivian's in it to win. Vivian agrees to the $3,000 deal because she wants $3,000. Richard Gere, Edward. Why do I remember these characters' names? But
why
Edward
not? It's classic.
Classic, that's true. Edward wants a deal because he wants to have like a nice stable girlfriend type on his arm for his week of events.
Hmm.
Like, and they fall in love along the way, and I mean I'm not going to say that Pretty Woman is an enduring example of good romantic practices, but I'm like it's a good if you think about most romantic comedies, like most of them are just like love is something that happens. Love is like the emphasis in something that happens.
Hmm.
It's always like plot wise, it's always motivated by something else going on. Like for example, say, your love interest's crazy ex is trying to destroy humanity with a magical tablet that
Right.
only you can help him destroy. Like
Right.
just a normal day in the life for Lisa Maza.
Exactly. All right. So before I pivot to what is currently influencing you, although I don't know what could ever be influencing you as much as this, I do want to just pause for a second and give everybody who's listening a chance to write down or Google or whatever, where to watch the things that we have talked about so far, because I do feel like they are deserving of a view. And I hope that the conversation inspires people to watch it. So I do need to just give a quick disclaimer that everything that I'm about to say in terms of where to find these shows, it's as of today, the day of this taping. We know that sometimes these things do shift off services. So please don't yell at me if you come to this episode late and it's no longer where I said it was. And the other part of this is that I am not, and neither is Made Possible by Pop Culture, getting any sort of perks or sponsorship by me. I'm just listing this organically because I do want you to find it. So Gargoyles, which obviously number one thing we're talking about, streaming on Disney Plus. We did mention X-Files pretty heavily. That's streaming on Hulu. The Office is streaming on Peacock. And then we just mentioned Pretty Woman, so I very quickly checked, and it is on Hulu and Peacock. So there's lots of homework already for you guys at home, but there's more because I do always ask my guests to come up with what is influencing them in pop culture today. And Liz picked something else on Disney Plus, and I'm fascinated by this. So again, Liz, you just please set this up for us.
So what is currently influencing me is the presence of adult content on Disney Plus. And initially this was inspired by the fact that technically, if you are both a Disney Plus and a Hulu subscriber, it is possible right now to go to the Disney Plus app and watch the film Poor Things, which, not exactly Disney Plus branding. There's a lot more of everything than you would normally get in a Disney Plus movie.
Sure.
The Poor Things thing is a weird exception born of the synergy. If you are not a Hulu subscriber, you do not have access to it. If you are, an actual child and your parents have enabled the parental access, you will not be able to watch Poor Things. But I've been, but the question of how much adult content can you watch on Disney Plus has been a really fascinating one for me from the very beginning of Disney Plus run. And I remember there was this one day in like late 2019 when I was actually feeling, if I recall correctly, I was waiting for comments from actual Disney about an article I was trying to get together. I was writing for Vulture about who plays the Mandalorian on the Mandalorian, because 90% of the time it's not Pedro Pascal. Helmets are helpful in this regard. And I had Bryce Dallas Howard on the record saying she never worked with Pedro. Anywho, I was waiting for comments. I was feeling very anxious. So I decided to, kill some of that anxiety by going through literally every film available on Disney Plus at that point. And I wasn't like watching every single one.
I understand, but still to scroll through pages and pages of titles is a commitment.
I was basically looking to see at how many F-bombs were available in the category. Like how many times have you heard someone who say the F word on Disney Plus by watching some of their content. And this is again before they even enacted parental controls, which they only did to bring over the originally produced for Netflix Marvel series, which do feature adult language, and you can now hear the N-word on Disney Plus. I believe. I actually should really double check if they've changed that.
I mean, I imagine that they had to leave it the same because of you would hope it's the creator's wish to have it in there. Then I imagine it's the same. But I'm sure they put a disclaimer on the front of the episode like they do with the old movies. Some of these things are not something you should repeat.
Well, the use of the N-word in Luke Cage, I think it's not like Song of the South.
Right. But I would still imagine there's some sort of disclaimer. It wouldn't be the same disclaimer. I just would imagine they're prepping their audience because your audience is watching it. Maybe expecting something else.
I don't know.
I don't know. I haven't researched it. You can all yell at me on the internet. I'll research it after this podcast. Maybe I'll put a note in the comments. We'll see.
I would be curious because the thing they did enact parental controls so that you can now watch TVMA content, which Luke Cage technically falls under, as does Luke Cage. I think Luke Cage maybe wasn't TVMA, even though it did have some pretty strong language. I think Punisher is officially the first TVMA Marvel show, but I could be wrong. Anywho, my point in bringing all this up is it's a fascinating thing, I think, just because it makes you think about the ways in which language is used. It makes you think about some of the sequences that might appear in a Marvel film, etc. You know, in going through the full archive, like which I did again just recently because
Mm.
we're exploring a list about this. You know, aside from the really obvious stuff, like, you know, Daredevil, not Daredevil, geez. Deadpool's 1 and 2 are on Disney Plus, which means that God bless us all. There's a pegging scene on Disney Plus you can watch right now. Um, and uh Sorry, that just makes me laugh. But yeah, like, I mean, but that's, I guess, why that's, I guess, why I'm interested in it. Just like as a longtime Disney fan and, you know, maybe a borderline Disney adult. You know, I don't know what I would score on that kind of scale, but I'm definitely closer to it than not.
Yeah.
Even with that, I've always been very fascinated by these kinds of rebellions, these kinds of like moments that puncture the quote unquote family friendly aesthetic. And, you know, so like for me, chronicling every F-bomb that you can hear on Disney Plus, which is a much larger number now and not just on stuff that's age restricted. Like, I feel like, you know, like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 has a really blatant one.
Hmm.
And uh, you know, it's not like gratuitous. It feels, I mean, it's a weird choice in the moment, I think. Like, I remember in the movie, when I was watching the movie for the first time, I was like, yeah, that's the one you wanna use? Like, you could put that you get one F-bomb and that's where you wanna put it?
Mm.
Sure.
I mean, but
Um,
you bring up a really interesting point, though, just in terms of like how we look at language. I do think something like that is a great example of whether it's in an adult show or a kid show, there are rules about censorship of certain words and what you can and cannot say on certain channels or how many times you can say something on a certain channel. But I always look at it and say, kids are hearing this stuff at home. They're hearing this stuff all over the place. To me, it's not the word itself that matters, it's the context in which it's used. And, you know, even the N word, like I don't use it. It's not for me to use, but if I hear it in a rap song where, an artist is talking about his friend, another artist, that's a very different context
oh, yeah.
than if I'm watching some, old movie where a white man plantation owner is using it against his slave. Obviously, we all know that. I just feel like I need to say it. Um, and I think, but why I'm bringing this up is because I think having these types of movies and having this type of content and this language on a platform that we think is historically or just simply looks like it's mostly for a younger audience, I would hope is teaching that younger audience to think about these things. You heard that word. In what context did you hear that word? What does it mean? How did it make you feel? Would you use that word in the same way or in a different way? I don't like the idea, even honestly, even sometimes saying something is a quote a movie for adults upsets me. Like when I was a kid and I couldn't go see an R-rated movie without an adult, it upset me. I understood why it was created that way, but at the same time, I was like, you're limiting how I can learn, and I don't like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think the best argument for putting pretty strict controls on what kids can access is that it's not that it's about protecting kids, it's about letting parents be the ones in charge of what their kids
Mhm.
act and being able to make sure that if your kid does hear a big word that's clearly new for them, they can have that you can have the conversation with them that you just described having.
Yeah,
I
assuming that parents are willing to do that. I personally feel like a lot of the times the controls are there because parents don't want to do that. They'd rather just, you're not going to be exposed to that right now. And whether that's because they're too young or because the parents don't want to have the hard conversations, I can't really say. It's obviously different family to family, but that's that's what when I think of, if a kid stumbles upon Deadpool, for example, that'd be a real weird conversation to have with your parent. They're probably not going to ask what that was. They're probably going to Google it and learn their own way.
Mhm.
But at least they're learning. I think you're adding to what you know about the world and you're deciding how you feel about these things. And I don't necessarily want that to happen for a 6-year-old, but that would be my boundary. If I was a parent, I would have a certain age on there.
yeah, I mean, I always think about back to when I was a kid, and my brother and I's favorite movie was a fine film called Spaceballs.
Mm,
And Spaceballs is one of those movies where you watch it as a kid and you're like, haha, I like the dancing alien puppet. Haha. John Candy is a man, half dog. His name is Barf. That's funny. There's a lot of great jokes in that movie that are pandering directly to a young audience, but that even in like 1987 or whatever was fully indoctrinated into a Star Wars mindset.
mm,
But of course, if you watch that movie as an adult, you're like, oh, I cannot believe I, as a child, was allowed to watch this.
mm.
And the reason I was allowed to watch it as a child is that my parents, uh, I guess they understood this, that I was just like, I just wasn't getting the more adult stuff.
Yeah, I mean that is a good point. You know,
Like,
there's a piece of it that will go over your head, and if you don't ask the question, then maybe when you get older and you watch it again, you'll realize there's another layer.
yeah, I mean, yeah, arguably, we all learned the word asshole a little too young, but like, sometimes you're surrounded by assholes, and you got to
Also,
be able.
yeah, what's too young? Honestly, you need to have a way of expressing yourself when you encounter someone you don't. I learned it when I don't know when I learned it, but I repeated it for the first time when I was 3. So, you no, that was too young. Okay,
No,
so,
no,
but
I just thought it was funny.
but you know
But no,
what's so funny about
I think
this?
it's
We're
I think
talking about how kids should or shouldn't be seeing it on TV. I learned it from my dad in the house.
yeah.
So that's what I'm saying is like, you try all you can to call something adult versus kids, MA versus Y7, PG-13 versus R, whatever you want. You can put the parental control on that only controls so much, and so I don't know. I do really like the idea of this world expanding, whether it's because of the Hulu connection or simply they need a wider catalog on Disney Plus by itself. I like what it can do for honestly the business of like who would have Disney Plus, but I also like what it would do for like the kinds of content that kids is loose. I'm not saying again like a 6-year-old, but younger audiences can find, because sometimes I go on Disney Plus and I look around and I'm like, it's really all for young people. Like I want to go back now and do what you did and look at title by title, because when I looked at it over the holidays for something to watch, and I felt like what I found was really a lot of the Sweet Life of Zach and Cody style shows that are just not for me. I've aged out of that. I'll just say that.
Well, I mean, I can tell you, Three Men and a Baby. Great little,
Mm,
fun comedy. How funny is it to watch three grown adults who just can't seem to take care of that baby? And then you watch your 6-year-old watches that movie and it has the fun question of, "Mommy, what's cocaine?"
mm,
Because I believe, if I recall correctly, there a good chunk of the Three Men and a Baby plot line involves like a cocaine deal gone wrong. Um,
yeah. I mean, maybe they need to know what it is, because they're gonna, you don't want your kid. I'll just listen, parents are gonna come for me and that's okay. But the way I look at it is like, I don't want to send a dumb kid out in the world, because when they encounter that in the world, the explanation that they may get for what it is won't be so kind. The world won't be kind to them if they don't know what something is, but also if they don't know what something is, they can sometimes be in more danger. So it's, you can have this conversation about a lot of things. We're talking about content in movies, but like I think it goes well beyond that too. And just, how soon is too soon to talk to your kids about death or racial profiling, whether you have kids of color or not kids of color, like the privilege that white kids are afforded that others are not. Like some people may be going, oh my God, we're so glad she doesn't have children right now. But like, I think about these things all the time.
I think, like, I mean, honestly, stigmatizing it and making it forbidden and hiding it behind controls just makes kids more interested.
Mm,
I just want my kid to learn about cocaine the same way I did, not on the streets, but from Steve Gutenberg. See, there we go.
nice. Yep. I
It
don't see
makes it
anything wrong with that.
better for the joke.
I
Good
don't
for
think I listen, I don't see anything wrong with that. I also, it brings up an interesting question that I have, because I think about this all the time. You just said, if it's behind a control, it's forbidden and you want it more sometimes. And I will say there were a lot of, I think maybe the reason I get so up in arms about like it's not just for adults, like kids learn and grow, and is because when I was younger, I wasn't allowed to watch so much. My parents felt like I don't know if they didn't trust me or if they didn't want to have the hard conversations. I don't know the reason. We never really talked about it, but there were just so many things I wasn't allowed to watch. And clearly it's backfired on them because this is what I do for a living. But was there something like that for you where now when you're scrolling through these Disney Plus movies and you're thinking about who might stumble upon this, does it bring up any memory from your younger years of like, oh man, if it was on Disney Plus when I was a child, I could have actually maybe watched it. I could have actually stumbled upon it because I wasn't allowed to.
I was very lucky in that my parents had a lot of trust in me, and or either that or they both worked full time and they didn't have the time to care. I think column A, column B, pick
Sure.
but but yeah, no, the one thing I was never allowed to watch was the movie Disclosure. Weird,
Well, good reason.
I mean, weirdly, what happened was I got too it was because I'd read the book is the thing, because I was reading a lot of Crichton. I was reading a lot of like adult fiction at like the age of 13 or 14. Um, and I read the book for Disclosure, and I was like, oh, I want to watch the I basically I made a big deal of like saying to mom, like, oh man, Disclosure's premiering on HBO on Saturday night. Can I watch it? And for the first time like ever, she like looked at a rating for something. I was like, no. And so I was forbidden from seeing the movie Disclosure. Um, which, if you're gonna pick one movie to keep your kid from, I guess that's fine. Like, adults probably shouldn't watch Disclosure either. No one should watch
Well, that's
Disclosure.
for different reasons.
It's just not a very good movie. I think I have seen it at some point, and I think I remember thinking like, man, the sex scenes didn't really live up to the book.
Mm,
Because the
mm.
sex scenes in the book were much more descriptive. But that was the first time. That was the first time, first and to best of my knowledge, the only time my parents forbid me from watching something. But I mean, my mom was showing me Rocky Horror when I
Mm.
was 10. Like, I think they came from the idea of like, if we can watch it with them and we can explain anything they have questions about, like they'll be fine.
Exactly. And
And
that's how it should be.
yeah, and yeah, in that respect, I feel like I was raised very well, and I came out of it with a healthy appreciation for all media,
That's good. That's good.
which
Well,
led us down this path.
exactly. That's why we do what we do now. Well, I
And
do want to also just say, as I mentioned earlier, where you can find things. Obviously, all of the movies we were just talking about are on Disney Plus because that's the point of what what Liz was talking about. But Disclosure, not on Disney Plus, not available to
what?
stream at all. You can rent it, you can buy it, you can rent it. I'm sure Amazon, iTunes, etc., but not available for streaming. So we'll leave you with that. If you want to go watch that tonight, you can
Don't
comment
watch
on the
Disclosure.
video.
Watch
You can
it.
send me notes on social media, what you thought. But as always, this is made possible by pop culture. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And say thank you so much for Liz coming on and Tank Girl's back. I'm so happy. Yay. Just in time. Thank you guys both for coming on.
Thank you. We worked. One of us worked really hard to be here.
And it
Um,
was Tank Girl, obviously.
oh yeah, she really put some effort in.